13 years. That is what it took for Nathan Drake being on the big screen to go from idea to reality. Alright there guys, and welcome back to another video. Today it's finally time for me to give my thoughts and review of the Uncharted movie. I saw it the day it came out, as much as people were concerned about will this movie be any good, I of course was as well, but I was still excited to see this movie. And the main consensus I've seen from other people reviewing it is a lot of people are saying it feels like the movie feels like a cutscene that they would usually skip, along with the fact that it's a better action movie than it is an Uncharted movie, and I do get that. There's also been a lot of toxicity when it comes to the actors, because people are really upset the fact that Nathan Fillion was not the one playing Nate, and instead it was Tom Holland. I get that. I too believe that Nathan Fillion would be a much better fit for Nate than Tom Holland is. But I did not go into the movie with that mindset. I went into the movie with the mindset of, this is who we've got as our actors. Tom Holland as Nate and Mark Wahlberg as Sully. That's what we've got to do. So the movie has a lot of references to the other Uncharted games put in there, because of course it does. But it's like, if that wasn't the case, what's the point? Like, I do see people complaining that the movie tried to cram in as many references to the games as it could, and yes, it did do that. But what's the point in having an Uncharted movie if it doesn't reference anything? The movie certainly would not make sense as a game. I'll tell you that. The movie would not make sense as an Uncharted game. It only makes sense as a movie. I was worried that it was going to do what Uncharted 3 did, and we just go here, there, and everywhere. But no, it didn't quite do that, which is a good thing. The movie starts at the plane set piece, if you remember from Uncharted 3, when Nate is hanging out the edge of a plane. Yeah, we start right there. That's where the movie starts. And the very first shot of the movie is of Nate's Sic Parvis Magna ring, which is a very important piece of the Uncharted universe. Even if in the games it got swallowed in some quicksand at the end of Uncharted 3. But you see, the difference between Uncharted fans and non-Uncharted fans at this scene, for people like me who know the games inside out, the second I saw the fact that we started the movie at the plane scene, I already knew we will be coming back here about halfway through the movie, because I mean, 2 of the 4 main Uncharted games did that. Uncharted 2 and Uncharted 4. They start in the middle, and then we go back in time to a different point, and we work our way back to this scene. And this movie was no different. It did just what Uncharted 2 and 4 did, because halfway through the movie we do return to this scene. The movie's way of introducing Nate and Sully to each other was very interesting, because they meet at a bar, as Nate is serving a woman, because he's what happens to be one of the bartenders, and steals her bracelet. Only Sully is one step ahead and steals the bracelet from Nate without Nate even realising, which is how they end up meeting. Even though in the trailers for the movie, look, you want to be a bartender and you're a little old for prom. Maybe I just have a dreadful memory, but I don't actually remember that line. I do not remember that line appearing. Maybe I just have a memory worse than a goldfish. But once Nate and Sully start their journey, we have a reference to Uncharted 4 with the auction house. Remember that? Where Nate has to turn the power off, Sam has to steal one of the waiter uniforms to steal the cross, and Sully is just keeping watch. Every time the person conducting the auction says, we are starting at whatever amount of money, and Sully has to just keep raising his hand in order to keep bumping the price up, even though he's playing with money he don't have. Now, the movie doesn't actually copy Uncharted 4. It tries to. Nate is trying to turn the power off, but one of the main villain's henchmen, the main villain of this movie is called Santiago, or at least you think he's the main villain when you meet him. It's another one of those, my family has been searching for this many centuries for this artifact. Just like how Marlowe's organization was doing that for the cipher disc, with the ring and the cipher disc in Uncharted 3. She said 400 years of searching for that ring. The same thing here. 500 years of searching for this gold that Sully's after. But Nate fails to turn the power off because one of the henchmen happens to be Scottish, and Nate has no idea what he's saying. I say Americans probably can't understand Scottish people that well because they sound so different. So Nate screws up turning the power off, so he has to think of something else. So he jumps on a bunch of the lights that are hanging from the ceiling, causes a big ruckus. Sully makes sure to grab the briefcase that the gold cross they are looking for, very similar to how the Uncharted 4 auction house, they're looking for the St. Dismas cross. So they're both game and movie, they're looking for a cross. They manage to just about get away from our female antagonist, who is a bit like Nadine from Uncharted 4. She's the capable fighter of her and Santiago, the same way Nadine was a much more capable fighter than Rafe. But Nate and Sully get themselves away from there and head off to Barcelona, where they meet up with Chloe Fraser, who steals one of the crosses straight away. So Nate and Sully have to chase her down. This feels a bit like the not Madagascar chapter of Uncharted 4, the one after that, where you're walking through a city looking for a specific building, and then you go inside and then there's a whole bunch of puzzles to do. That's what this felt like. Nate and Chloe are underground, even though Nate gets a little bit of PTSD from seeing nuns, because of course Nate was raised by nuns. And also, something I should have already mentioned, the flashback scene from Uncharted 4, the first one where Nate and Sam are a lot younger at the orphanage, yeah, they also reference that scene where Sam leaves Nate his lighter, which Nate does use quite a bit in this movie. Nice symbolism. So in Barcelona, Sully is on the ground, is on the surface. Nate and Chloe are underground, as there are two gold crosses that work as keys, which of course is a reference, whether direct or not, is a reference to Uncharted 2, because remember the Purba dagger, that was a key. These crosses work the same way. Nate and Chloe almost drown trying to get out. I feel like that might be a reference to Uncharted 2, where Nate and Chloe fall down into that pit and the ceiling's got a load of spikes coming down. Maybe it's a reference to that. I might be just clutching at straws there. But something that Nate was told by Sully earlier in the movie, Chloe is going to backstab you. Do you really want to trust her? Nate still trusts her. What does Chloe do? Exactly what Sully said she would do. She backstabs him she knocks him out and runs off with the crosses. And Nate was told by everyone around him that his brother Sam was lost, not gone, which is very similar to something Sam said right at the start of the movie. Something is lost, not gone. And Nate believes the same thing, as he'd been receiving postcards from Sam across a span of 10 years. Which, funnily enough, actually end up being very important in order to find the gold that they're looking for. So, after Chloe knocks Nate out and leaves, we find out that she was actually working with Santiago and the villains the whole time. Which, that is definitely a reference to Uncharted 2, because of course throughout that game, Chloe keeps swapping between on Nate's side and on Lazarevich's side. So no one can really tell what side she's on until the very end of the game. That's when you know that she's on your side. So after that, they head off to a cargo plane. Well, it's not quite as big as the cargo plane from Uncharted 3, but it's a big plane. You know where we are. We're back. We're in the middle of the movie, and we've returned to the very start. As just like at the start of the movie, Nate falls out of the plane and has to hang on to the containers that are hanging on by a thread to the plane. But here comes a plot twist I actually was not expecting. Our female antagonist, out of nowhere, just slits Santiago's throat for no reason. There was no build-up, no tension. Like, if Nadine would have killed Rafe in Uncharted 4, you could see it happening because of the animosity between the two throughout the game. But there was none of that here. Out of nowhere, she just slits his throat and kills him. And it's like, okay, our main villain is dead. I mean, the only other time in an Uncharted game that the supposed main villain has been killed by the secondary villain was the first game, in Drake's Fortune, when Navarro killed Roman after he turned into one of the mutants. But that's it. So this came out of nowhere. The plane starts coming apart, because of course it does. This is an Uncharted game, well, movie. It's Uncharted, so you know anything Nate touches is going to be destroyed. Nate climbs up the containers, finally makes it back up, and just like at the start of the movie, this very nice looking red car that Santiago arrived at the auction house in all that time ago, Chloe happens to be driving it, crashes into Nate, and Nate goes tumbling back out of the plane. And they do a very nice little reference to Uncharted 3 when you get knocked out of the plane in that game. You have to steer Nate in midair to grab the container. It's very much the same here. Nate has to do the very same thing. Well, first he grabs onto the car that Chloe is in, and then she jumps out off the car in midair to grab the container, and Nate has to do the same and follow her. And then you have the very same scene where Nate grabs the parachute strap of the container and is pulling it. Of course, in my head, I was spamming the triangle button like you do in Uncharted 3. That's what I was doing in my head when I was watching that scene. And instead of landing in the Rubicali Desert like we did in Uncharted 3, we land in the ocean. But this, of course, is what Nate had enough of Sully by this point. Or more like Sully had jumped off the plane already with a parachute, and Nate chose not to do the same thing. But Nate was not too fond of Sully at this point, after telling him that Sam was basically dead. Even though, spoiler alert, he's not. But they don't tell you that until the very end. So Nate and Chloe arrive on an island. They wash up on an island. They're very similar to how Nate does in Uncharted 3 after you've escaped Ramsey's ship, if you remember that. And this comes my favourite scene of the entire movie. Nate and Chloe wash up on the shore, get up, and as they're walking towards the city, a guy on a sun lounger, you know those plastic chairs that are normally out next to swimming pools at hotels? Those chairs? A guy is sat on one and says, "What the hell happened to you?" And Nate says, "Oh, just got thrown out of a moving plane." And the guy says, "Something like that happened to me once." Because this wasn't just any other old guy. This was Nolan goddamn North. The man responsible for making Nathan Drake the iconic character that he is today. I'm so glad it made me so happy to see Nolan North in this movie. There is no way you could have an Uncharted movie without the man responsible for playing Nathan Drake over the years. And the sad thing is, Tom Holland actually spoiled this before the movie released. It's almost like it's literally his thing now. I thought he only ever spoiled Marvel movies. No, he'll spoil any movie he's in. It doesn't matter if it's Marvel or not. If you guys watched the video of Jacksepticeye, a couple days before the movie came out, in like February 8th or 9th, where he played Uncharted 4 with Tom Holland, Tom Holland literally spoiled the fact that there's a scene with Nolan North in the movie before the movie had come out. So I kind of already knew there was going to be a scene with Nolan North before there actually was, because Tom Holland literally said that that's what would happen. That was annoying. But my favourite scene in the movie, and a lot of people, I mean, if you're an Uncharted fan, even if you don't visually show it, in your mind, you must be smiling like hell when you saw Nolan North. Because he is partly responsible for why this movie even exists. He's the one that made Nathan Drake the iconic character he is today, to make him now a movie and video game character. So Nate and Chloe go into a hotel and try working out how to get to the gold next. It just so happens that the postcards that Mr. Samuel Drake had sent Nate over the years all were clues, because you needed to put all of these postcards together in order to find the clue that would lead you to the coordinates of where the treasure is. And Sam's lighter that he gave to Nate all those years ago comes in very handy, as there's some text on one of the postcards that can only be seen if you put a lighter or some light underneath the postcard to tell you the coordinates. So Nate writes the coordinates down while Chloe is asleep. Then she steals the coordinates and leaves before he wakes up. Little does she know, Nate was thinking way ahead of her. Normally Nate's saying, "I never thought that far ahead." No, he was thinking he was 4 parallel universes ahead of her, as he wrote down wrong coordinates for Chloe to steal, and wrote down the correct ones and stuck them in the top of a wine bottle, which she never thought to look. So she has the wrong coordinates and has gone off somewhere else, while he has the right coordinates and is heading his way to the very location the gold is at. So he arrives at the place on the map that the 2 crosses connected in, because in order to finally figure out on the map that Nate had been obsessed with throughout the whole movie, he had to put the 2 crosses down at very specific points, turn them until the top of both crosses connected. And wherever they connected, that is the location the gold is at. So Nate gets himself over there, but there's some rocks in the way, so he just swims under them. then had a plot hole the day after pointed out to me. If Nate has to do that, has to swim under the rocks, why do the villains not have to do that? Because the villains appear on the pirate ships, which is where the gold is that Nate finds. Very, very similar. Pretty much almost identical to how the location of the ships in Uncharted 4 right at the end of the game looked. Very similar. The villains, their clothes are not soaking wet, so they clearly didn't have to swim under any rocks, but Nate did. Didn't quite make sense. But Nate gets onto the ship and sees that, yeah, the gold is all here. And Sully happens to already be there as well. And the villains wouldn't have actually even figured out where to go without happening to see Nate on his boat, going to the location so they could follow him. And this sets up our final set piece of the movie, where a helicopter airlifts two helicopters airlift the pirate ships out of the cavern that they're in. So we're referencing Uncharted 1 and 4 at the same time. Number 1, because we're airlifting the treasure out of where it is, and Uncharted 4 because it's a bunch of gold on pirate ships, just like at the end of the game. So this is like where the only action where Nate actually shoots anyone. Like, there's very little shooting in this movie, considering what considering the games the movie is based off. So Nate and Sully actually do some pretty good choreographed fight scenes where they're having to use each other as shields to swing themselves to the next enemy to take down. And Sully makes his way to one of the helicopters and starts climbing up to it. Knocks out the two guys in the helicopter, throws them off, and says to Nate, "Hey kid, you okay?" And Nate is like barely hanging on to the bottom of the ship, saying, "Barely." So Nate has to try and keep himself on the ship, but our female antagonist is now taking him on, and she's kicking his ass because just Nadine did the same thing. What were you expecting? She even manages to get the anchor of the ship thrown down to where it's kind of stopping the helicopter a little bit, to where it can't move any further. Sully just about manages to get away from it and he throws the treasure, or he throws the gold that he had put in his backpack, throws it at the female antagonist, which hits her in the head, knocks her all the way down into the ocean, and in order to take her down, the helicopter breaks its straps from the ship and drops the ship on top of her. In classic Uncharted fashion, you've spent the whole game looking for this treasure just to leave with nothing. But they didn't leave with nothing because Nate had some gold of his own that he gives to Sully. And they look down seeing that Chloe is still around. So she hasn't died, but of course she hasn't. She's not really a villain. And dropping the ship on top of our female antagonist, yeah, that's gonna kill her. Then Nate and Sully sail off into they fly off into the sunset, very similar to how in Drake's Fortune Nate, Sully and Elena all sail off into the sunset. And the movie ends with a scene that mirrors the end of Drake's Fortune in a way. They're completely different scenes, but they have one thing in common. Right at the end of Drake's Fortune, you might remember, Nate says to Elena, "Sorry you didn't get your story." And then Elena says, "That's alright, there'll be other stories. You still owe me one." And Nate says, "I'm good for it." Basically, that was a Naughty Dog confirming that, yeah, there is probably going to be an Uncharted 2. And then, of course, just under 2 years later, there was an Uncharted 2. And the movie ends with Nate... No, the movie ends with Samuel Drake writing yet another postcard to Nate within his prison cell. Basically confirming that there's probably going to be an Uncharted 2 movie. Because if there wasn't, why would they show that? So that's probably going to happen. And you know what? I'm all for that. Right. What did I think of the movie overall? Well, the action scenes that we got were pretty good. Some of the jokes were funny, but others were pretty cringe. Seeing Nate being able to work his way around a mobile phone, considering how useless he was with technology in the games, is a bit strange. Mark Wahlberg just is not old enough to be Sully. I'm sorry, he's just not old enough. This movie has taken so long to be made that Mark Wahlberg was originally casted as Nate. That's how long this movie has taken to get made. That he actually got cast as Sully instead. But the chemistry between Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg is pretty good, but it'll never come close to the chemistry that Nolan North and Richard McGonagall have. And Sophie Ali does a fairly good job as Chloe, but let's be honest, Claudia Black, it will always be the best Chloe Fraser. I felt like the whole consensus of it's a better action movie than an Uncharted movie, I do get that. And I guess, yeah, I agree. But it's like, what would you want from an Uncharted movie? I get it. You want Nathan Fillion to be Nate. He isn't. Please, just get over it. If he never made the Uncharted fan film back in 2018, no one would even be saying this. It's only because he showed us how good he would be as Nathan Drake that everyone's saying this. Of course, they wanted it to make it more commercially beneficial for them, so they picked Tom Holland. And can you guys tell me in the comments if you know, is Spider-Man No Way Home and the Uncharted movie the two closest movie releases of December 2021 and February 2022 where the same actor plays the main role in both movies? Because I can't think of any of two movies where the same actor plays the main character in both that are released as close as that. The plot hole I already explained about right at the end dumbs it down a little bit for me. So my final review of the Uncharted movie is a 6.8 out of 10. It would have originally been a 7, but that little plot hole at the end knocks it down 0.2 to 6.8. But there looks like there's going to be a sequel, and I can't wait for that. So if you guys have enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave a like. Subscribe if you're new. Tell me what you thought of the movie if you've seen it. And until next time, catch you later.